The champagne had gone flat an hour ago, just like my marriage. I sat at table 12 watching my wife Sarah dance with Daniel Klein for the 4th time tonight. Not that I was counting. Okay, I was totally counting. What else was I supposed to do at my friend Natalie's wedding reception while my wife practically dry-humped her best friend on the dance floor? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Another beer, Eliot? The waitress looked at me with that pitying expression I'd been getting a lot lately. Small towns are great for gossip, terrible for privacy. Make it a double whiskey, I said, loosening my tie. The colonial-style venue was stuffy, all exposed beams and fake rustic charm. Like everything else in our upscale New England town, it was designed to look authentic while being completely artificial. Sarah threw her head back, laughing at something Daniel whispered in her ear. Her auburn hair caught the light from the crystal chandeliers, and for a moment, I remembered why I'd fallen for her 8 years ago, before she became an HR executive, before she started caring more about her image than her marriage, before Daniel Klein slithered into our lives with his tech startup money and his BMW. You know what your problem is, Eliot? I looked up to find Maya, Sarah's work friend, sliding into the chair beside me. She was already drunk, her lipstick smeared, and her designer dress wrinkled. I'm sure you're going to tell me, I said, taking a sip of whiskey. It burned, but not as much as watching my wife's hands on another man's chest. You're boring, Maya said, like she was delivering groundbreaking news. Sarah needs excitement, adventure. Daniel gives her that. Daniel gives her expensive dinners and lies about his net worth, I replied. I give her a home renovation business that actually turns a profit and a husband who doesn't cheat. Maya laughed, a harsh sound that cut through the wedding music. Honey, when's the last time you surprised her? When's the last time you made her feel special? I could have told her about the surprise weekend I'd planned for Sarah's birthday last month. The one she'd canceled because Daniel needed help with a work crisis that turned out to be shopping for a new sports car. I could have mentioned the renovated master bathroom I'd spent 3 weeks perfecting, complete with the clawfoot tub she'd always wanted. The one she'd barely glanced at before complaining that the faucets didn't match her vision. Instead, I just smiled. You're right, Maya. I should definitely take relationship advice from someone who's been divorced twice. Her face flushed red, and she stumbled away, muttering something about men and their egos. I turned back to the dance floor, where Sarah was now whispering something in Daniel's ear that made him grin like he'd won the lottery. The band switched to a slow song, and I watched my wife melt into another man's arms. Around us, the wedding guests pretended not to notice, but I caught the sideways glances, the whispered conversations behind champagne flutes. Everyone knew. Everyone, except the husband. Well, that wasn't exactly true anymore. I'd suspected for months. The late nights at the office, the new lingerie that never made an appearance in our bedroom, the way she'd started criticizing everything I did, from how I loaded the dishwasher to how I talked to her friends. Classic cheater behavior, make the spouse the villain so the affair feels justified. But suspicion and proof are two different things, and I was nothing if not methodical. It came from years of running a construction business. You don't build a house without a solid foundation, and you don't destroy a marriage without solid evidence. Eliot! Natalie, the bride, appeared beside my table in a cloud of white silk and desperation. Why aren't you dancing? This is supposed to be a celebration. I looked at her flushed face, at the forced smile that didn't quite hide the stress lines around her eyes. Natalie had always been Sarah's friend more than mine, but she'd tried to include me in their social circle. Tried and failed, mostly because I didn't find their gossip sessions and wine-fueled drama particularly entertaining. Just enjoying the show, I said, nodding toward the dance floor. Natalie followed my gaze and had the grace to look uncomfortable. Oh, well, I'm sure Sarah's just being friendly. You know how she is. Yeah, I said, finishing my whiskey. I know exactly how she is. The song ended, and Sarah finally remembered she had a husband. She walked over, her cheeks flushed and her eyes bright with the kind of excitement I hadn't seen from her in years. Daniel followed behind her like a lovesick puppy, straightening his tie and trying to look casual. "Having fun, honey?" Sarah asked, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. She was performing for the crowd, playing the role of the devoted wife. "The time of my life," I replied. "Though I have to say, you two looked like you were having more fun than anyone else here." Daniel had the decency to look slightly embarrassed, but Sarah just laughed. "Don't be silly, Eliot. Daniel's just a good dancer, unlike some people." The jab hit its mark, and I felt the familiar burn of humiliation in my chest. Sarah had always been good at that. The casual cruelty disguised as teasing. Death by 1,000 cuts, delivered with a smile. "You're right," I said, standing up. "I should probably head home. Early day tomorrow." "But the reception's not over," Natalie protested. "They haven't even cut the cake yet." "I'm sure you'll manage without me," I said, pulling out my wallet. I left enough cash on the table to cover my drinks and a generous tip. "Congratulations again, Natalie. Beautiful wedding." I walked toward the exit, feeling their eyes on my back. Behind me, I heard Sarah's voice, pitched just loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "There he goes again. God, sometimes I wonder why I even bother bringing him to these things. He's such a downer." Laughter followed her words. Not cruel laughter exactly, but the kind of polite chuckling that happens when someone says something awkward and everyone feels obligated to respond. The sound followed me all the way to the parking lot. I sat in my truck for a long moment, watching through the venue's windows as the party continued without me. Sarah was back on the dance floor with Daniel, spinning and laughing like she didn't have a care in the world, like she didn't have a husband sitting alone in a parking lot, finally understanding that his marriage was over. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Don't wait up. Going to help Natalie clean up. Might be late." I almost laughed. Even her lies were lazy now. I could see Natalie through the window, dancing with her new husband, while the catering staff handled the cleanup. But Sarah probably figured I was too stupid or too trusting to notice. She was wrong on both counts. I drove home through the quiet streets of our picture-perfect town, past the restored colonials and manicured lawns that screamed successful middle class. Our house was one of the nicest on the block, a 1920s colonial that I'd spent 2 years renovating from the foundation up. New electrical, new plumbing, refinished hardwood floors, custom kitchen cabinets that I'd built myself. It was my masterpiece, the physical embodiment of everything I'd worked for. And apparently, it wasn't enough. I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, looking at the house that no longer felt like home. The porch light was on, casting a warm glow over the front steps where Sarah and I used to sit on summer evenings, planning our future together. Back when we still had a future. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Your wife's car is in the parking lot of the Marriott downtown. Room 237. Thought you should know. A friend." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. Not surprise. I'd moved past surprise months ago. This was something else, something that felt like clarity. I deleted the text and walked into my empty house. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tonight, I had work to do. I woke up alone, which wasn't unusual anymore. What was unusual was the silence. No shower running, no coffee brewing, no sound of Sarah getting ready for work while complaining about her hair or her clothes or whatever small thing had offended her that morning. I checked my phone. 7:30 a.m. and no messages. Sarah's side of the bed was still made, which meant she'd never come home. Bold move, even for her. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen island I'd installed last spring, looking out at our backyard. The garden Sarah had insisted on was already dying from neglect. Apparently, wanting something and maintaining it were two different skills, and she'd only mastered the first one. My phone rang. Sarah's name flashed on the screen, along with the photo I'd taken of her last Christmas. She was laughing at something, her green eyes bright with genuine happiness. I couldn't remember what had made her laugh that day. Probably wasn't me. "Morning," I answered, keeping my voice neutral. "Eliot, thank God. I was so worried you'd be upset." Her voice was breathless, like she'd been running, or doing other cardio activities. "I ended up staying at Natalie's place. We were talking until so late, and I didn't want to wake you driving home." "Thoughtful of you," I said, taking a sip of coffee. It was bitter, but everything tasted bitter these days. "Are you mad? You sound weird." "Just tired. Long night." "Well, I'll make it up to you tonight, okay? Maybe we can order Thai food and watch a movie. Like old times. Like old times. When was the last time we'd actually done that? When was the last time Sarah had spent an entire evening at home without checking her phone every 5 minutes or finding an excuse to go out?" "Sure," I said. "Sounds great." "I love you, Eliot." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, not because they were meaningful, but because they were so obviously empty. Sarah said, "I love you," the way other people said, "Have a nice day," automatic, meaningless, a social obligation. "Love you too," I replied, because what else was I supposed to say? After she hung up, I sat in the quiet kitchen and made a decision. I was done with suspicion and speculation. I was done being the trusting husband who believed obvious lies. It was time for facts. I finished my coffee and walked upstairs to Sarah's home office. She'd converted the spare bedroom into her workspace during the pandemic, complete with a standing desk, ergonomic chair, and a bulletin board covered with motivational quotes about success and ambition. The room always felt cold to me, like a corporate conference room instead of part of our home. Her laptop was on the desk, closed but not locked away. Sarah had always been careless with security, which drove me crazy from a business perspective. I ran a construction company in the digital age. I understood the importance of protecting sensitive information. I opened the laptop and waited for it to boot up. The password prompt appeared, and I paused. This was a line I'd never crossed before. In 8 years of marriage, I'd never gone through Sarah's personal things. I'd respected her privacy, trusted her completely. That trust had been a mistake. I tried her birthday first. Wrong. Then our anniversary. Wrong again. I was about to give up when I remembered something Maya had said at the wedding. Something about Sarah needing excitement and adventure. I typed, "Adventure 2023, wrong." Then I tried, "Daniel 2023. The desktop appeared, and I felt my stomach drop. Even her laptop password was about him. How long had this been going on? I opened her email first, scanning through the usual work messages and shopping confirmations. Nothing obviously incriminating, but then again, Sarah was smarter than that. She wouldn't use her work email for personal business. I tried her text messages next, but they'd been syncing to her phone, not the laptop. Frustrated, I was about to give up when I noticed a folder on the desktop labeled Personal Backup. It looked like she'd been backing up her phone data manually. Inside the folder were hundreds of files, photos, text message exports, even some audio recordings. I started with the most recent text backup and felt my world tilt sideways. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Room 237, like always. D. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. S. Your husband looked pathetic at the wedding. How do you stand it? D. He's convenient. The house, the stability, the business. But God, Daniel, when I'm with you, I feel alive again. S. I scrolled through months of messages, each one a knife twist in my chest. They'd been planning this affair like a military operation, coordinating schedules, booking hotel rooms, even discussing what lies to tell me. Sarah had turned deception into an art form. But it was the photos that really broke me. Sarah in lingerie I'd never seen. Sarah in Daniel's apartment, wearing nothing but his dress shirt. Sarah in various hotel rooms, looking happier than she'd looked with me in years. The timestamps showed they'd been meeting at least twice a week for the past 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of fake smiles over dinner, of working late and girls' nights and helping Natalie with wedding planning. Every excuse had been carefully crafted, and I'd believed every single one. I sat back in her chair, feeling numb. Part of me had hoped I was wrong, that my suspicions were just paranoia and insecurity. But the evidence was overwhelming. Sarah wasn't just cheating, she was living a double life. My phone buzzed. A text from Randy, my foreman. Job sites flooded from last night's rain. Need you here ASAP. Work. The one thing in my life that still made sense. I closed the laptop and headed downstairs, grabbing my keys and tool belt. But I didn't delete the photos I'd taken with my phone. Evidence was evidence, and I had a feeling I was going to need it. The job site was a mess, just like Randy had said. We were renovating a 1950s ranch house, and the basement had flooded when a temporary drainage pipe got clogged. I spent the morning with a wet vacuum and a bad attitude, trying to salvage what we could. You look like hell, Randy observed around noon. He was a good guy, mid-50s with calloused hands and a direct way of speaking that I appreciated. We'd worked together for 5 years, and he'd become more of a friend than an employee. Rough night, I said, wringing out a soaked drop cloth. Sarah giving you grief again? Randy had never liked Sarah. He'd been polite to her at company barbecues and Christmas parties, but I could tell he thought she was high maintenance. He wasn't wrong. Something like that, I said. Want to talk about it? I considered telling him everything. Randy was divorced himself, so he'd understand. But I wasn't ready to say the words out loud yet. Making it real by speaking, it felt like too much. Maybe later, I said. Let's just focus on this mess for now. We worked in companionable silence for the next few hours, pumping water and assessing damage. Physical labor had always been therapeutic for me. There was something satisfying about fixing things that could actually be fixed. By 4 p.m., we'd made good progress. The water was gone, and most of the materials were salvageable. I was loading the wet vacuum into my truck when my phone rang. Hey, honey, Sarah's voice was cheerful, almost manic. How's your day going? Wet, I said. Job site flooded. Oh no, that's terrible. Listen, I have some bad news. Maya's having a crisis at work and she really needs someone to talk to. Would you mind if I went over there tonight instead of doing our movie night? I almost laughed. She wasn't even trying to be creative with her lies anymore. Maya was probably at home with a bottle of wine, completely unaware that she was being used as an alibi. Sure, I said. Maya needs you. You're the best, Eliot. I don't deserve you. That, at least, was true. After she hung up, I stood in the driveway of the half-renovated house, looking at the suburban street around me. Normal people living normal lives, dealing with normal problems like flooded basements and broken appliances. When had my life become so complicated? I drove home and parked in the garage, next to Sarah's empty space. She'd be out late again tonight, probably in room 237 at the Marriott, doing things with Daniel that she hadn't done with me in months. But instead of sitting around feeling sorry for myself, I had a better idea. I walked into my workshop, a converted section of the garage where I kept my tools and worked on personal projects. It was my sanctuary, the one place in the house that was completely mine. Sarah never came in here. She said it smelled like sawdust and motor oil. I fired up my laptop and started researching. If Sarah wanted to play games, I'd learn the rules, but I'd play to win. 3 days later, I was having coffee at Dunkin' Donuts when I overheard two women from Sarah's office talking in the booth behind me. "I can't believe she's being so obvious about it," one of them was saying. "Did you see them at lunch yesterday? They weren't even trying to hide it." "Maya said she's been covering for Sarah with her husband," the other woman replied. "Apparently he has no idea. Poor guy." I took another sip of coffee and pretended to read my newspaper. The poor guy knew more than they thought. "Daniel's wife left him last year because of his cheating," the first woman continued. "Now he's doing the same thing to someone else's marriage. Men like that never change." Wait. Daniel had been married? Sarah had never mentioned that. In fact, she'd always talked about him like he was this successful bachelor who just hadn't found the right woman yet. Another lie in an ever-growing pile. I paid for my coffee and left, but the conversation stuck with me. If random co-workers were noticing, then Sarah and Daniel were being sloppy. That was good news for me and bad news for them. I spent the morning at a different job site, installing custom cabinets in a kitchen renovation. The homeowner, Mrs. Patterson, was a sweet, elderly woman who kept bringing me coffee and asking about Sarah. "How's that lovely wife of yours?" she asked around 11 a.m., appearing with a fresh cup and homemade cookies. "She's good," I said, adjusting a cabinet door. "Busy with work." "Such a pretty girl. You're lucky to have her." I used to think so. Now I wondered if Sarah was the lucky one. She had a husband who worked hard, paid the bills, and never asked too many questions. She had financial security, a beautiful home, and the freedom to do whatever she wanted, including whoever she wanted. "Mrs. Patterson," I said, "can I ask you something? You've been married for what, 50 years?" 52 in October, she said proudly. "Did you ever... was there ever a time when you thought about..." I struggled to find the right words. She studied my face with sharp blue eyes. "Are you asking if I ever cheated on my husband?" "I guess I am." "No," she said simply. "Not once. Not because I'm a saint, mind you. I had opportunities, but I made a promise, and I kept it. That's what marriage means, keeping your promises even when it's hard." I nodded and went back to work, but her words echoed in my head. Keeping promises even when it's hard. Sarah had apparently missed that part of our wedding vows. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Emergency girls' night tonight. Sarah really needs to blow off steam. Thanks for being understanding." I stared at the message, feeling a familiar mix of anger and amusement. Maya was either the most gullible person on the planet, or she was actively helping Sarah cheat. Either way, she was about to become collateral damage. I finished the cabinet installation and drove to the office supply store. If Sarah wanted to play games, I needed to upgrade my equipment. I bought a small digital recorder, a telephoto lens for my camera, and a GPS tracker that looked like a phone charger. That evening, I watched from my living room window as Sarah got ready to leave. She'd changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on a black dress that I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I'll probably be late," she said, kissing my cheek. Her perfume was different, something expensive and sultry that I'd never smelled before. "Maya's really going through it right now." "Poor Maya," I said. "Tell her I hope she feels better." Sarah's smile faltered for just a moment, like she was trying to remember what lie she'd told about Maya's supposed crisis. Then she recovered, flashing me a bright grin that didn't reach her eyes. "I will. Love you." "Love you too." I waited until her car disappeared around the corner, then grabbed my equipment and headed out. I knew where she was going, the same hotel she'd been using for months. But tonight, I wasn't just going to sit home and wonder. Tonight, I was going to get proof that would hold up in court. The Marriott downtown was a nice hotel, the kind of place where business travelers and cheating spouses felt comfortable spending money they couldn't afford. I parked across the street and waited, adjusting my telephoto lens. Sarah's car pulled into the parking lot at 7:47 p.m. She sat in the driver's seat for a few minutes, checking her makeup in the rearview mirror. Then Daniel's BMW pulled up beside her, and I started taking pictures. They didn't kiss in the parking lot. They weren't completely stupid. But the way Sarah's face lit up when she saw him, the way she practically bounced out of her car like a teenager on a first date, told me everything I needed to know. I followed them into the hotel lobby, staying far enough back to avoid being seen. They went straight to the elevator without stopping at the front desk, which meant Daniel had already checked in. Room 237, just like always. I found a spot in the lobby bar where I could see the elevators and settled in to wait. The bartender, a woman in her 30s with short blonde hair and tired eyes, brought me a beer without being asked. "Rough day?" she asked. "Getting rougher," I said, taking a sip. "I'm Rebecca. I've been working here for 3 years, and let me tell you, I've seen it all. Cheating spouses, corporate espionage, family drama. This place is like a soap opera." "Must be interesting work," I said. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Interesting isn't the word I'd use. Depressing, maybe. You'd be amazed how many people come through here lying to someone they're supposed to love. I looked around the lobby, at the well-dressed business travelers and couples having quiet conversations. How many of them were cheaters? How many were here betraying someone who trusted them? "Ever think about saying something?" I asked. "To the people being cheated on, I mean." Rebecca studied my face. "You're not here on business, are you?" I shook my head. "My wife's upstairs with her boyfriend, room 237. "Shit," Rebecca said, glancing around to make sure no one had overheard her profanity. "I'm sorry, man. That's rough. How long have they been coming here?" She hesitated, probably weighing hotel confidentiality against human decency. "A few months. Always the same room, always Tuesday and Friday nights. She tips well, so the staff remembers her. Tuesday and Friday nights. Sarah's late work meetings and girls' nights with Maya. I'd been such an idiot." "What are you going to do?" Rebecca asked. "I'm not sure yet," I said. "But whatever it is, it's going to be memorable." I stayed in the lobby bar for 2 hours, nursing my beer and planning. Rebecca checked on me periodically, bringing me pretzels and making small talk. She was good people, the kind of person who saw other people's pain and actually cared about it. At 10:15 p.m., the elevator dinged and Sarah appeared, looking flushed and disheveled. Daniel followed a few minutes later, straightening his tie and trying to look casual. They left separately, but I could see them texting as they walked to their cars. I paid my tab and left Rebecca a generous tip. "Thanks for the conversation," I said. "Good luck," she replied. "And remember, whatever you're planning, don't do anything that'll land you in jail. She's not worth it." She was right, of course. Sarah wasn't worth destroying my life over, but she was definitely worth a little creative justice. I drove home and found Sarah already there, showered and in her pajamas, sitting on the couch with a glass of wine and her laptop. "How was girls' night?" I asked, settling into my recliner. "Good," she said without looking up from her screen. "Maya's feeling better. We just talked and had some drinks." "Where did you go?" "That new wine bar downtown. You know, the one with the live music." I nodded, even though the new wine bar had been closed for renovations all week. I'd driven past it that morning and seen the construction signs, but I didn't call her on the lie. Not yet. "I'm glad Maya's feeling better," I said. "What was wrong anyway?" Sarah's fingers paused over the keyboard. "Just work stuff. You know how it is." "Sure do." We sat in silence for a while, Sarah typing on her laptop and me pretending to watch TV. But I was really watching her, studying the woman I'd been married to for 8 years. When had she become such a good liar? When had deception become so easy for her? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw your wife at the Marriott tonight. Room 237 again. She's not even trying to hide it anymore. Thought you should know. A friend." I glanced at Sarah, but she was absorbed in whatever she was doing on her laptop. Probably texting Daniel about their next rendezvous. I deleted the text and smiled. Tomorrow, things were going to get interesting. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. Sarah was already gone, another early meeting that probably involved coffee and morning sex with Daniel. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. XOXO. The fake affection in that note made my skin crawl, but it also gave me exactly what I needed, time and opportunity. I called Randy and told him to handle the job sites for the day. Then I drove to my lawyer's office. Clara Bishop had handled the legal work when I started my construction business 5 years ago. She was in her late 40s, sharp as a knife, and had a reputation for being ruthless in divorce cases. If I was going to war, I wanted her on my side. Eliot, she said, gesturing for me to sit down in her corner office. It's been a while. What can I do for you? I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken at the hotel, along with screenshots of Sarah's text messages. I need to know what my options are. Clara studied the images without changing expression. She'd probably seen worse. How long has this been going on? At least 6 months, maybe longer. Any joint assets I should know about? House, business, investments? The house is in both our names, but I put down the down payment and paid for all the renovations. The business is mine. We have a joint checking account and savings, but most of our money is separate. Kids? No. Good. That makes things simpler. Clara leaned back in her chair. Massachusetts is a no-fault divorce state, so the adultery won't affect the legal proceedings much, but it might help with asset division, especially if you can prove she was spending marital funds on the affair. I showed her the hotel receipts I'd found in Sarah's email. She's been paying for the hotel rooms with our joint credit card. Clara smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. Now that's interesting. Using marital funds to finance an extramarital affair could definitely work in your favor. We spent the next hour going over my options. File for divorce immediately, or wait and gather more evidence. Confront Sarah, or let her dig herself deeper. Try mediation, or go straight to court. What do you want, Eliot? Clara asked finally. Do you want to save the marriage, or do you want out? I want out, I said without hesitation, but I also want her to understand that actions have consequences. Revenge can be expensive, Clara warned, and it can backfire. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well. I'm not talking about anything illegal, I said. I just want her to face some consequences for what she's done. She's been lying to me for months, humiliating me in front of our friends, spending our money on her boyfriend. She thinks I'm too stupid and too weak to fight back. And she's wrong? Dead wrong. Clara nodded slowly. All right, here's what we're going to do. Keep gathering evidence, but don't let her know you're onto her yet. The longer she thinks she's getting away with it, the more careless she'll become. And careless people make mistakes. I left Clara's office feeling better than I had in months. For the first time since this whole mess started, I had a plan. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a player in the game. I spent the rest of the morning setting up surveillance equipment. The GPS tracker went under Sarah's car, disguised as part of the exhaust system. A small camera went in our bedroom, hidden in the alarm clock. Another camera went in the living room, concealed in a picture frame. I wasn't planning to catch them having sex in my house. Sarah was too smart for that. But I wanted to record her lies, her phone conversations, her casual cruelty when she thought no one was listening. That afternoon, I drove to Sarah's office building. It was a sleek glass tower in the business district, the kind of place where everyone wore expensive suits and talked about synergy and market penetration. Sarah's startup occupied 3 floors, and from what I'd heard, they were doing well enough to make everyone feel important. I parked across the street and waited. At 5:30 p.m., employees started trickling out of the building. I spotted Maya first, walking quickly toward the parking garage with her head down. She looked stressed, which was interesting. Maybe she was finally feeling guilty about helping Sarah cheat. Sarah and Daniel emerged together at 5:45 p.m., talking animatedly about something. They walked to Daniel's BMW, and he opened the passenger door for her. Such a gentleman. I wondered if his ex-wife had thought so too, before she discovered what kind of man she'd married. I followed them through downtown traffic, staying far enough back to avoid detection. They weren't going to the Marriott this time. Instead, Daniel pulled into the parking lot of an upscale restaurant called Chez Laurent, the kind of place where dinner for two cost more than most people made in a day. I parked where I could see the restaurant entrance and settled in to wait. Through the telephoto lens, I watched them get a table by the window. Sarah was animated, laughing and gesturing while Daniel hung on her every word. She looked happier than I'd seen her in years. My phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. "Hey, honey," I answered. "Hi, I'm so sorry, but I'm going to be even later than I thought. This client meeting is running long, and then Maya wants to grab dinner and talk about her situation some more." Through the camera lens, I watched Sarah talking to me while Daniel poured wine. She was looking right at him while lying to her husband. "That's fine," I said. "Take your time." "You're the best, Eliot. I don't know what I'd do without you. I'm sure you'd figure something out." After she hung up, I sat in my truck and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger exactly, something more focused than that, something that felt like determination. I took pictures of them through the restaurant window, capturing intimate moments and obvious affection. Then I drove to Maya's apartment complex and knocked on her door. Maya answered in sweatpants and a tank top, holding a glass of wine and looking surprised to see me. "Eliot, what are you doing here?" "Looking for Sarah," I said. "She said you two were having dinner to talk about your problems." Maya's face went pale. "Oh, we were, but then she got called away. Work emergency." "Funny," I said, showing her a photo on my phone. Sarah and Daniel clinking wine glasses at Chez Laurent. "She looks pretty relaxed for someone handling a work emergency." Maya stared at the photo, then looked up at me with something like fear in her eyes. "Eliot, I can explain." "Can you? Because I'd love to hear how you explain 6 months of lying to help my wife cheat on me." "I never meant for it to go this far," Maya said, tears starting to form. "Sarah said you two were having problems, that you were probably going to get divorced anyway. She said she just needed some time to figure things out." "And you believed her?" "I wanted to believe her. Sarah's my friend, and she seemed so unhappy. But I know it was wrong, Eliot. I felt terrible about it." I studied her face, looking for signs of deception. Maya was a lot of things, gossipy, dramatic, self-centered, but she wasn't a natural liar like Sarah. Her guilt seemed genuine. "How long have you known?" I asked. "About Daniel? A few months. But Eliot, I swear I told her to end it. I told her she was going to destroy her marriage." Apparently, she decided the marriage wasn't worth saving. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to give Sarah exactly what she wants," I said. "Freedom." I left Maya's apartment and drove home, feeling oddly calm. The house was dark and quiet, exactly the way I'd left it that morning. I made myself a sandwich and sat at the kitchen island, looking at the photos on my camera. Sarah and Daniel holding hands across the dinner table. Sarah throwing her head back in laughter at something he'd said. Sarah leaning across the table to whisper something in his ear. They looked like a couple in love, which I suppose they were. The problem was, one of them was married to someone else. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Dinner running even later. Don't wait up. Love you." I looked at the timestamp, 9:47 p.m. According to my photos, she and Daniel had left the restaurant at 8:30 p.m., which meant they were probably back at the Marriott in room 237, doing what cheating spouses do. I poured myself a beer and opened my laptop. Time to do some research on Daniel Klein. If I was going to destroy him, I needed to know his weaknesses. What I found was interesting. Daniel's startup was struggling financially, despite appearances. They'd burned through 2 rounds of venture capital and were looking for a third. His divorce had been expensive. His ex-wife had taken him for half of everything, including his house and his savings. His BMW was leased, his apartment was rented, and according to public records, he was leveraged to the hilt. Daniel Klein was a fraud, living on borrowed money and borrowed time. And Sarah, who prized financial security above almost everything else, had no idea she was sleeping with a man who was basically broke. That gave me an idea. I spent the next hour crafting a detailed financial report on Daniel's company, using publicly available information and some creative analysis. Then I created an anonymous email account and sent the report to Sarah's work email, along with a note. Thought you should know what kind of man you're involved with. A concerned friend. Sarah would see it first thing Monday morning, and knowing Sarah, she wouldn't be able to resist investigating further. She was nothing if not practical when it came to money. I finished my beer and went to bed, sleeping better than I had in weeks. Tomorrow was Saturday, which meant Sarah would probably spend the day with Daniel while telling me she was shopping, or getting her hair done, or meeting with wedding vendors for some friend's upcoming ceremony. But I had plans of my own. It was time to start evening the score. Monday morning brought the first crack in Sarah's facade. I was drinking coffee in the kitchen when I heard her gasp from the living room, where she was checking email on her laptop before work. "Everything okay?" I called out, though I had a pretty good idea what had caused her reaction. "Fine," she called back, but her voice was strained. "Just work stuff." I smiled into my coffee mug. The anonymous financial report had found its target. 20 minutes later, Sarah appeared in the kitchen, dressed for work but looking distracted. She poured coffee with shaking hands and kept glancing at her phone. "You sure you're all right?" I asked. "You seem upset." "I'm fine, Eliot. Just some drama at the office." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "I'll probably be late tonight. Big project deadline." "On a Monday?" She paused with her hand on the doorknob. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just seems like you've had a lot of late nights lately." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Are you accusing me of something?" "Should I be?" For a moment we stared at each other across the kitchen. I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out if I knew something or if I was just being paranoid. Finally, she forced a smile. "Don't be ridiculous. I'll see you tonight." After she left, I called Randy and told him to handle the job sites again. Then I drove to a coffee shop near Sarah's office building and waited. At 11:30 a.m., Sarah emerged from the building, walking quickly and talking on her phone. She looked agitated, gesturing with her free hand as she spoke. I followed her to a small park a few blocks away, where she sat on a bench and continued her conversation. I parked where I could see her and rolled down my windows. Sarah was talking loudly enough for me to catch fragments of the conversation. "Can't believe you didn't tell me," she was saying. "Financial situation is completely different. Need to know where we stand." She was talking to Daniel, obviously. The financial report had done its job. Sarah ended the call and sat on the bench for a long time, staring at her phone. She looked lost, like someone who'd just discovered that everything she thought she knew was wrong. Welcome to the club, I thought. That evening, Sarah came home at her normal time, which was the first surprise. The second surprise was that she actually seemed to want to talk. "How was your day?" she asked, settling onto the couch next to me. She was sitting closer than she had in months. "Good. Finished the Patterson kitchen. She loves it." "That's great." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then. "Eliot, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you think I'm a good judge of character?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, do you think I'm good at seeing people for who they really are? Or do I just see what I want to see?" I studied her face, looking for signs of what she was really asking. "I think you see what you want to see," I said honestly. "Most people do." Sarah nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately, about how well we really know the people in our lives." "Any particular reason?" She was quiet for so long I thought she wasn't going to answer. Then, "I found out today that someone I trusted someone I thought I knew well, has been lying to me about important things. That must have been hard. It was. It made me realize how easy it is to fool someone who wants to believe in you. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Sarah was upset about Daniel lying to her, while she'd been lying to me for months, but I didn't point that out. Not yet. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I'm not sure. Part of me wants to confront them, but another part of me wants to just walk away, pretend I never found out." "Walking away doesn't solve anything," I said. "It just lets the liar off the hook." Sarah looked at me with something like surprise. "You really believe that? That people should face consequences for their lies?" "Absolutely. Actions have consequences. That's how the world works." She nodded again, then leaned against me on the couch. It was the first physical affection she'd shown me in weeks, and it felt strange, like being hugged by a stranger. "I love you, Eliot," she said quietly. "Do you?" She pulled back to look at me. "Of course I do. Why would you ask that?" "Just making sure." We watched TV in silence for the rest of the evening, but I could feel the tension radiating from Sarah. She was processing the revelation about Daniel, trying to figure out what it meant for their relationship. For the first time in months, she was questioning her choices. It was a start. The next morning, I was installing trim in a bathroom renovation when my phone rang. Clara Bishop's name appeared on the screen. "Morning, Clara." "Eliot, we need to talk. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, but I've been doing some research on your wife's boyfriend, and I found something interesting." I met Clara at 2 p.m., curious about what she'd discovered. "Daniel Klein is in more trouble than we thought," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. "His company is about to go under. They've missed payments to vendors, their office lease is in default, and there are rumors about SEC violations." SEC violations? Securities fraud. Apparently, they've been inflating their revenue numbers to attract investors. If the SEC decides to investigate, Daniel could be looking at criminal charges. I whistled low. "Does Sarah know about this?" "I doubt it. This information isn't public yet, but it will be soon." "How soon?" "Days, maybe weeks. When it hits, Daniel's going to be radioactive. No one will want to be associated with him." I leaned back in my chair, thinking. Sarah had already discovered that Daniel was financially unstable. If she found out he was also potentially a criminal, it would destroy whatever feelings she had left for him. "Clara," I said, "how would you feel about accelerating that timeline?" She raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" "Nothing illegal, just making sure the right information gets to the right people at the right time." Clara smiled. "I like the way you think." That evening, I put the next phase of my plan into motion. I created another anonymous email account and sent detailed information about Daniel's company to a financial reporter at the local newspaper. Then I sent similar information to Sarah's HR department, along with a note expressing concern about employees being involved with potentially criminal associates. By Thursday morning, the story had broken. "Local tech startup under investigation for securities fraud" was the headline in the business section. Daniel's photo was prominently featured, along with details about the SEC investigation and the company's financial problems. I was reading the article online when Sarah stumbled into the kitchen, looking like she hadn't slept. Her hair was a mess, her eyes were red, and she was wearing the same clothes from the day before. "You look terrible," I said, which was both honest and cruel. "Thanks," she muttered, pouring coffee with shaking hands. "Everything all right?" Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Define all right." I showed her the newspaper article on my laptop. "Did you see this? That guy Daniel from your office is in some serious trouble." Sarah's face went white as she read the headline. "Oh my God. Isn't he the one you've been working with on that big project?" "Yes," she whispered. "We've been working together a lot. Well, you might want to distance yourself from him. This kind of scandal can rub off on people. Sarah nodded absently, still staring at the article. I could practically see her world crumbling as she read about Daniel's lies, his financial problems, his potential criminal liability. Everything she thought she knew about him was false. I have to go, she said suddenly, grabbing her purse. Work? I have to talk to someone. After she left, I sat in the quiet kitchen and felt something like satisfaction. Sarah was finally experiencing what I'd been going through for months. The shock of discovering that someone you trusted had been lying to you. The humiliation of realizing you'd been played for a fool, but I wasn't done yet. Not even close. I spent the day making phone calls and sending emails. By evening, I'd arranged for copies of the newspaper article to be delivered to everyone in Sarah's social circle: Natalie, Maya, her work friends, even her mother. I wanted to make sure everyone knew that Sarah had been working closely with a man who was now under federal investigation. That night, Sarah came home looking defeated. She'd obviously been crying, and her usual polished appearance was completely disheveled. Rough day? I asked. The worst. She collapsed onto the couch and put her head in her hands. Eliot, I need to tell you something. My heart rate spiked. Was she finally going to confess? I made a mistake. A big mistake. What kind of mistake? Sarah looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I've been seeing someone, Daniel Klein. We've been having an affair. I stared at her for a long moment, letting the confession hang in the air. How long? 6 months. Maybe longer. I don't know why I did it, Eliot. I was stupid and selfish, and I hurt you terribly. Yes, I said quietly. You did. Can you forgive me? Can we work through this? I looked at my wife, really looked at her. For the first time in months, she was beautiful, even with tears streaming down her face. She was smart and successful, and had been the center of my world for 8 years. But she was also a liar and a cheat who had only confessed because her boyfriend had turned out to be a fraud. I don't know, I said. I need time to think. Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. I understand. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. But as I watched her cry, I realized something important. I didn't want to make it right. I didn't want to forgive her or work through our problems or rebuild our marriage. I wanted her to pay for what she'd done, and I was just getting started. The next morning, Sarah was gone before I woke up. She'd left another note. Staying at Maya's for a few days to give you space. I'm sorry for everything. S. Perfect. That gave me time to implement the final phase of my plan. I called in sick to work and spent the morning making preparations. First, I changed all the passwords on our joint accounts and transferred my half of our savings to a separate account that only I controlled. Then I called a locksmith and had all the locks changed on the house. Finally, I contacted a moving company and arranged for Sarah's belongings to be packed and stored. By noon, everything was in motion. Sarah's clothes, personal items, and furniture were being loaded into a truck while I supervised from the front porch. Mrs. Dunbar, our elderly neighbor, watched from her garden with obvious curiosity. Spring cleaning? She asked, walking over to the property line. Something like that, I said. Sarah and I are making some changes. I see. Well, I hope everything works out for the best. Mrs. Dunbar was too polite to ask directly, but I could see the questions in her eyes. The whole neighborhood would know about the moving truck within hours. In a town this size, gossip traveled faster than the internet. My phone rang. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. What the hell is going on? She demanded without preamble. Maya just drove by the house and said there's a moving truck in our driveway. Your belongings are being moved to storage, I said calmly. The address is 1247 Industrial Drive, Unit 23. You can pick up the key at the front office. You can't do this. It's my house, too. Actually, I can. I've consulted with a lawyer, and since you abandoned the marital home, I have the right to secure the property. Your belongings are safe, but you can't live here anymore. Eliot, please. We can work this out. I made a mistake, but we can fix this. No, Sarah, we can't. I hung up and turned off my phone. The movers finished loading the truck around 2 p.m., and I spent the rest of the afternoon changing Sarah's access codes to everything: the garage, the security system, even the Netflix account. If she wanted to start a new life, she could do it without any connection to our old one. That evening, I drove to Rebecca's bar at the Marriott. I needed a drink and some friendly conversation before the real fireworks started. Well, well, Rebecca said as I settled onto a bar stool. Look who's back. How's the wife situation? Resolved, I said. She's officially someone else's problem now. Good for you. What'll it be? Whiskey, the good stuff. Rebecca poured me a generous shot of top-shelf bourbon and leaned against the bar. You look different. Lighter somehow. I feel different, like I've been carrying a weight around for months and finally put it down. That's what happens when you stop pretending everything's fine and start dealing with reality. I was halfway through my drink when Sarah burst into the bar looking frantic. Her hair was a mess, her makeup was smeared, and she was wearing the same clothes from yesterday. She spotted me immediately and marched over. We need to talk, she said, grabbing my arm. No, we don't. I gently removed her hand. We're done talking. Eliot, please, I know you're angry, but throwing me out of our house isn't going to solve anything. It's not our house anymore. It's my house. You made your choice when you decided to sleep with Daniel for 6 months. That's over. Daniel and I are finished. When I found out about his legal problems, I realized what a mistake I'd made. So you only ended it because he turned out to be a criminal? Not because you were cheating on your husband? Sarah's face flushed. That's not... It's more complicated than that. No, it's really not. You cheated, you lied, and you got caught. Actions have consequences. Rebecca had been pretending not to listen, but now she spoke up. Ma'am, you're going to need to keep your voice down or I'll have to ask you to leave. This is none of your business, Sarah snapped. Actually, it kind of is, Rebecca replied. I work here. I've seen you and your boyfriend in this hotel dozens of times over the past few months. You want to talk about consequences? How about the consequence of humiliating your husband in public? Sarah's mouth fell open. She looked around the bar and realized that other patrons were staring at us. The conversation was becoming a spectacle, which was exactly what I'd hoped for. Everyone knows, Sarah, I said quietly. The whole town knows about you and Daniel. Maya told her friends, your co-workers saw you together, and now with the newspaper article, everyone's putting the pieces together. You did this, Sarah said, her voice rising. You orchestrated this whole thing to humiliate me. I didn't orchestrate anything. I just stopped covering for you. I stopped making excuses for your behavior and letting you lie to me. I made one mistake. 6 months of cheating isn't one mistake. It's a lifestyle choice. Sarah looked around the bar desperately, as if searching for someone who would take her side. But the other patrons were watching us with the kind of fascination people reserve for car accidents and reality TV shows. Fine, she said, straightening her shoulders. You want to play hardball? I'll get a lawyer. I'll take you for half of everything. I smiled and pulled out my phone, showing her a photo from her own text messages. Sarah and Daniel in bed together, with a timestamp from 3 weeks ago. Good luck with that. Massachusetts might be a no-fault state, but adultery still matters when it comes to asset division, especially when you were using marital funds to pay for hotel rooms. Sarah stared at the photo, her face going pale. How did you... Your laptop password was Daniel2023. Really, Sarah? You made it almost too easy. The fight went out of her then. She slumped against the bar, looking defeated and small. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. What do you want? she asked quietly. I want you to sign divorce papers without contest. I want you to take your personal belongings and disappear from my life. And I want you to understand that this is what happens when you betray someone who trusted you. Sarah nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. And if I don't? Then I release all the photos and text messages to everyone we know. Your family, your friends, your co-workers. Everyone will know exactly what kind of person you are. You wouldn't. Try me. We stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, Sarah wiped her eyes and stood up straight. I'll sign the papers, she said. But I want you to know that I did love you, Eliot. I know you don't believe that now, but it's true. Maybe you did, I said. But love without respect, without loyalty, without honesty? That's not love, Sarah. That's just convenience. She flinched like I'd slapped her, then turned and walked out of the bar without another word. I watched her go, feeling oddly empty. For months I'd been planning this moment, imagining how it would feel to finally get my revenge. But now that it was over, I mostly just felt tired. Damn, Rebecca said, refilling my glass. That was intense. Yeah. You okay? I considered the question. Was I okay? My marriage was over, my wife was gone, and I'd just publicly humiliated the woman I'd once planned to spend my life with. By any reasonable measure, this should have been one of the worst days of my life. But instead, I felt free. You know what? I said, raising my glass. I think I am okay. Good for you. What's next? I looked around the bar at the normal people living their normal lives, dealing with normal problems. For the first time in months, I felt like I could be one of them again. I'm going to go home to my house, sleep in my bed, and wake up tomorrow without wondering what lies my wife is telling me. Then I'm going to work on rebuilding my life. Sounds like a plan. I finished my drink and left Rebecca a generous tip. Outside, the evening air was cool and crisp, full of possibility. I drove home through the quiet streets, past the houses where normal couples were probably having normal evenings together. Maybe some of them were happy, maybe some of them were struggling, but at least they were honest with each other. My house looked different somehow, smaller maybe, but also more mine. I parked in the garage and walked through the rooms that Sarah and I had shared for 5 years. Without her belongings cluttering the space, without her constant criticism and complaints, the house felt peaceful. I poured myself a beer and sat on the back porch, looking out at the garden Sarah had insisted on but never maintained. Tomorrow, I'd probably tear it up and plant something that actually had a chance of surviving. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the moving truck today. Hope you're doing okay. If you need anything, I'm here. Mrs. Dunbar. I smiled and typed back, "Thank you. I'm doing better than I have in months." Another text came in, this one from Randy. "Heard through the grapevine that you're officially single. Want to grab a beer tomorrow and celebrate?" "Absolutely," I replied. As I sat there in the gathering darkness, I thought about Sarah and Daniel and the mess they'd made of their lives. Daniel was facing potential criminal charges and the collapse of his business. Sarah was homeless, friendless, and facing a contentious divorce. They'd both lost everything they'd worked for, all for a few months of excitement and passion. Meanwhile, I had my house, my business, my friends, and my self-respect. I'd played the game by the rules even when my opponent was cheating. And in the end, I'd won. Not every dance needs a happy ending. Sometimes you just lead and let them stumble.